Hey, what if I told you that you could be a detective, but for the social world? Today, we're going to crack open the investigator's toolkit to see how sociologists solve the incredible mysteries of our society.
And you know, every good detective story needs a case. So here's ours. Can what a teacher secretly believes about a student actually change that student's future? We're not just talking about feelings. We're talking about their actual test scores. It sounds like a huge claim, right? So how on earth could a social detective even begin to prove it? Well, that's the case we're cracking today. And this isn't just some abstract puzzle for a textbook. We're talking about real people in real classrooms whose lives are being shaped by these invisible social forces every single day. The whole job of the sociologist is to make those forces visible. And that takes a serious investigation.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with that central question. Then we'll bust open the detective's toolkit and learn the golden rules for using it. After that, we'll explore the two main mindsets an investigator can have, follow the process from the very first clue to the final conclusion, and then figure out why any of this really matters in your life.
Okay, first things first. Every detective needs a case to solve. For sociologists, these cases are the big questions about how our world works. Everything from what's going on in one classroom to the forces that shape whole countries.
But here's the key difference between a real social detective and, just some person with an opinion. They don't guess. They follow a strict process. They gather evidence, they analyze clues, and they build a case based on solid information. There's a real method to the madness here.
So, what's actually in this toolkit? Well, every social detective has 4 main methods for digging into a case. Let's pop it open and take a look. First up, questionnaires. Think of this like casting a really wide net. You ask a ton of people the same exact questions, and bam, you can start to see big patterns and trends. It gives you that bird's eye view of the whole landscape. It's awesome for getting a sense of the scale of an issue. Next, you've got interviews. This is kind of like the interrogation room, where the detective gets the real deep story. Instead of just numbers, you're getting personal experiences, motivations, feelings. This is how you find out the why behind the patterns you spotted with that questionnaire.
Then there are experiments. This is basically the forensics lab of sociology. By carefully controlling a situation and changing just one little thing, a single variable, researchers can pinpoint cause and effect. It's hands down the most powerful tool for figuring out if A truly causes B.
And finally, we have observation. This is the classic stakeout. Sometimes the absolute best way to understand what's happening is just to watch. This tool lets sociologists see how people actually behave in the wild, which, let's be honest, is often totally different from what they say they do. Okay, so we've got our tools, but a great detective knows it's not just about having the gear, it's about knowing when to use it. And choosing the right tool for the job comes down to 3 golden rules. Every single investigation kicks off with this framework, and you can remember it as PET. P is for practical. Do I have the time, the money, the resources to pull this off? E is for ethical. Is this going to cause anyone harm? Do people know what they're signing up for? And T is for theoretical. What am I actually trying to find out here? Am I looking for hard numbers, or am I trying to get a deep personal understanding? But to build a truly rock-solid, airtight case, sociologists often expand on PET with this, it's a secret weapon. It's a full evaluation checklist called PERVERT. It takes our PET questions and adds 4 crucial layers. R is for reliability. If someone else did this, would they get the same result? V is for validity. Am I actually measuring what I think I'm measuring? E is for examples. What do other studies say about this? And another R for representativeness. Does my small group of people accurately reflect the bigger group I'm interested in? It's really the ultimate checklist for any investigation. Now that last letter, T, for theoretical, that one's a really big deal. It's not just a box to check. It actually determines the entire mindset the detective brings to the case. And in sociology, there are 2 main ways of seeing the world. So on one side, you've got positivism. Positivists are like the just the facts detectives. They're looking for hard social facts, almost like a natural scientist. They love quantitative data, numbers, statistics, things you can count. They're asking what happens. On the other side, you have interpretivism. Interpretivists want to understand the deep, subjective meanings behind why people do what they do. They prefer qualitative data, words, feelings, experiences. They ask, what does it feel like? This slide just simplifies it
perfectly. The positivist detective sees the dog wagging its tail and writes down an objective, measurable fact. Tail wags per minute. Done. The interpretivist detective, on the other hand, looks at the cat and is totally fascinated by the subjective mystery of what's going on in its head. One is chasing facts, the other is chasing meaning. Both are valid, they're just playing a different game. So we've got the tools and we've got the mindsets. But how does a real investigation actually unfold? Well, there's a formal process, a 7-step path that takes every detective from that first little nagging question all the way to cracking the case wide open. And the process is super logical. You start with a clear aim. Then you have to operationalize your concepts, which is just a fancy way of saying you decide how to measure something abstract, like intelligence or success. You do a little test run, a pilot study, to work out the kinks. Then you choose your sample of people. Only then do you actually go out and collect the data, analyze what you found, and finally state your conclusion. Which brings us right back to where we started, our case. Way back in 1968, 2 researchers, Rosenthal and Jacobson, used a field experiment to investigate this. They told teachers completely at random that certain students were late bloomers who were about to have a big academic growth spurt. A year later, with no other changes, those exact students showed much higher IQ gains. The conclusion cracked the case. What teachers believe about their students can literally become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, we've followed the clues, we've cracked the case, we've seen how sociologists do their job. But so what? Why does any of this matter to you? Well, because these skills turn you from just a passive bystander into a really savvy citizen.
And here's why this is so important. We are bombarded every single day with studies and headlines and polls, all claiming to have the truth. Understanding the detective work behind them is a superpower. You can now look at any claim and ask the right questions. Okay, but how do they know that? Was their sample any good? Is their data actually valid? You're now equipped to look behind the headlines.
And that's the real takeaway here. You now have the basic toolkit of a social detective. So I'll leave you with this. The next time you see a headline about some big new study, what's the first question you're going to ask to start your own investigation?